Okay, I'm going to go ahead and call to order tonight's meeting of the City of Santa Rosa Planning Commission and ask for roll call, please.
Let the record reflect that all commissioners are present except Commissioner Rumble.
Okay, thank you. With that, we'll move on to the approval of our August 24th minutes. Any other comments or additions to that? Not seeing any. Those will stand as printed. Next, we're going to move on to public comments, which is a time for any member of the public to come down and address the commission on items of interest to the commission that are not listed tonight as a public hearing. So I have a number of cards on this, and I'm going to go ahead and open public comments, and you have 3 minutes. I'm going to call Scott Chapman down. You can come to the dais or up there, and you have 3 minutes. Please watch the light bar so that you know. Great, thanks.
Thank you very much. My name is Scott Chapman, and I live on Rosa Way in the north end of the JC District. And I am here to protest the proposed Verizon cell tower at 510 Lewis Road. With me, I'd like to present to the Commission over 130 signatures of our petition to have the approval denied and ask Verizon to find a more suitable location for their cell phone tower. We're dealing with a lot of issues in the neighborhood from this cell tower. There are property value, property rights issues. Realtors, ours and others, including national realtors, have found that property values drop considerably, up to 30%, around cell phone towers. People, when surveyed, have pointed out that they would prefer not to live near a cell phone tower, and that if there was one in a neighborhood, it would greatly reduce their interest in buying or living in that neighborhood. This cell tower that is proposed will be roughly 50 feet behind my back fence. The back fence of the property my children play in, and that we live in, and the home that my wife also works in. It is going to be 24/7 exposure to very powerful radiation. Along with that, we've been fighting against Verizon, a very powerful corporation. I'd like to point out I'm a Verizon customer. I'm not against Verizon as a company. I think that this location is a poor choice, and a better choice could be found that would not impact our community. When this initially came out, folks within 300 yards were informed of the application. That amounts to roughly a block, and it was 24 households were informed. We have since then learned that since we have started this fight, Verizon has been sending out robocalls and robotexts to the entire city. So when they petition to build, they only let people within 300 feet know, or 300 yards. But when the fight starts, they let everybody know. They send out robocalls with no information, just simply saying, text 1 for yes, 2 for no. Call the city, tell the city you want better cell phone reception. The robocalls simply say, do you want better cell phone reception in your neighborhood? That's it, no other information. And what we find interesting is we haven't received any of the robotexts, any of the robocalls. We're fighting against a major corporation that has the resources to find better locations, but instead they jumped on the first location that came up, the first one that was easy for them, and they were not concerned about the rest of the community, which was not engaged until after a lease was signed with the property owner. We're also concerned that they've not done their due process with certain state requirements, such as CEQA, the California Environmental Quality Act, and we're concerned that they have not. Thank you very much for your time.
Great, thank you, Mr. Chapman. Yes, please do. Looks like it's either Camellia or Cecilia. Come on down.
Camellia.
Oh, Camellia. Okay, come on. You're not going to speak?
I'm not sure if someone else is in Chapman.
It is Chapman. I'm sorry. Didn't get to the last name. Sorry. Okay.
That's okay.
Yeah. And you have 3 minutes. Thanks.
Okay, thanks so much. And I guess this is the light bar right here.
That's the light
Okay.
bar. When
Amelia-
it hits red, you're done.
Okay, that's fine. Amelia Chapman, thank you so much. My husband, Scott Chapman, talking about the same issue. And if you don't mind, I'm just going to read a little bit. Please forgive me. but this is an issue that we're really upset about, and we're really struggling here because it's a handful of families, a lot of concerned citizens in the neighborhood. We've done a petition that has been turned in. The vast majority of people in our neighborhood are absolutely against the cell phone tower, as you can see by all the names and addresses on that petition. But we're fighting against Verizon, and they have the ability to text huge numbers of people, and we're citizens of Santa Rosa, we're citizens of, Sonoma County, of the state, and we're doing the best we can here. So again, please forgive me. Please consider the need for a cell tower, and we're asking you to oppose the cell tower at 510 Lewis Road. The current state legislation, SB 649, allows for the addition of mini cell towers on light poles and phone poles in California. This is another issue that has to be decided before all of these cell towers get put in locally. SB 649 allows for those mini cell towers on light and phone poles in California cities. San Francisco already has it. They're possibly also coming to Santa Rosa as well. So why is there a need for a cell tower at 510 Lewis Road? The only answer to that is it's Verizon trying to grab the last available locations for a Verizon-only tower for other purposes. The recent article in the LA Times, there's a trend with big telecom making a land grab before the passage of coming legislature. Our city is not a telecom playground or a laboratory to experiment on citizens. I want to touch on health issues. The vast majority of cell tower health research in America is funded by the telecom industry. This research is inherently biased. Government and independent research in Europe has found major health concerns for areas with cell towers, such as cancer, sleep disorders, childhood developmental issues. There's a lot of children in our neighborhood. It's a very diverse neighborhood, families, retired people. We have a really good thing going on. And to ask a community to take a 20 to 30% hit, this is not for a fire station. This is not for a health clinic or a police station. This is not for the greater good. This is for Verizon, a for-profit company. The Telecommunications Act of 1996, of course, forbids the use of health concerns as an argument against the placement of cell towers, and itself speaks volumes. If the towers are safe, why is there a need for a law forbidding the talk about health concerns? That's a question that I think needs to be answered. And finally, as we all understand the needs of modern communication, we're not against industry, we're not against technology, but we think that there's better locations, safer locations that allow for a buffer zone, that allow this residential area that is very close to a commercial area to just have a buffer zone, some ability. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Dwayne DeWitt.
Up here, ma'am. You're right
Okay.
there. Hello, my name is Dwayne DeWitt. I'm from Roseland. I'd like to request that you kind folks please go back to the policy of having one hard copy available of your full agenda rather than that new technological device up there. If one person's on it trying to figure it out, no one else can look at anything. And with the old hard copy, you could have pages taken out, look at them, others can look at other parts of the file. So in this case, technology is actually defeating the opportunity for more community engagement in knowing about the things on the agenda. Secondary to that, for a number of years I've been coming here hoping that you folks would engage more, that means you specifically, the appointed commissioners, would engage more with comprehensive planning for the southwest side of Santa Rosa. There was a plan that was put together recently. It was called a specific plan, and there were many in the community who felt that it was lacking. We didn't really see the commissioners there as much as we would have liked to and been able to interact with them. And now there's a bit of frustration on the part of some people as this area, some of it is known as the Roseland County Island, may be annexed into the city. And they feel that it would have been more helpful if we'd have had a more inclusive representation of appointed officials, if you will. That's what you're known as. there's this possibility that that area might be annexed this year. I say might because I've been watching this for decades and we don't really know. But should it be annexed, then there's the possibility that district elections may be coming forward to the city of Santa Rosa. I believe it's really important that those folks who may be annexed should be able to be a part of the discussion about district elections. And there needs to be a comprehensive discussion with the planning people also, because the districts will be not just geographic, but also demographic. There needs to be some sort of a comprehensive involvement of people. A while back, there was a thing called the Open Government Task Force. I don't know if you folks ever opened up the reports from that, but they're quite fun to look at and think about what could happen for the future. So I'm asking you to be a bit more proactive for the time you're on the Planning Commission. And if district elections come about, perhaps you should advocate there should be elected planning commissioners, not just appointed. That could even be more democratic. Thank you so much for your time. Looking forward to speaking with you about the Southwest Greenway as you look into the southeast. I'll put that down.
Thank you, Dwayne. Next, Dr. David Paul.
Hi, folks. Thanks for letting me speak again. In the last couple of weeks, we've discovered that we're not just talking about the house at 5679 Queen Anne Drive. We're talking about a big deal, much like the Verizon cell phone deal. The big deal is that between North Bay Regional Center and 3 supposed nonprofits, there are now between 40 to 50 homes in the Santa Rosa area that are earning now or potentially earning now between $200,000 and $250,000 per home in the pockets of the owner-operators. This is funded through the state of California, partially funded through the federal government, partially subsidized by the fact that there's no income tax for these at-home businesses, and partially subsidized by the county of Sonoma. So it's not a little deal, it's a big deal. And the home that I was originally slated to talk to you about next door to mine, 5679, is very similar to 3500 Happy Valley Court, in which they paid $1.1 million for this house and completely gutted the inside. And next to my house, they paid $1.125 over asking price and are gutting out. They're going to take all the appliances and use that for their own account. Not going to sell it and give it to the state. They're not going to use it to improve the community. They're going to put it in their own pocket. They started work on Happy Valley without permits, so please remind them that for 5679, you need to have all permits in hand. The financial irregularities that I pointed out to you last time have exponentially grown and are being investigated by NBC Bay Area. They're being investigated by Senator McGuire's office, and they're being investigated by other departments in the state of California. Because of that, we believe there is sufficient reason in our community, and we have our extended community also very concerned about this, that there's sufficient reason for this body to please require North Bay Regional Center and Brilliant Corners and the 2 other nonprofits whose names I do not have, they did not forward them to me, to put a stop, to hold off, to not allow them to go forward. Speaking about the specific house next door to mine, there are 5 separate reasons why it's an inappropriate
Thank you, Dr. Paul.
house.
So thank you.
Okay.
Okay.
I'll leave
And I
this.
definitely urge you to, I know you were invited to go talk with.
We did.
Okay, good.
Yeah, we
good.
spent time with
Good.
McGuire.
Please do
I'll
that.
leave this with.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Mike Raymond, you can go up there, or the one right behind you should work also, correct? Great.
Does that work? Can you hear me?
Okay, sorry, you do have to go over there. Sorry.
It looks like both the podiums are out today.
Okay.
Does this one work? No.
Is that
He's
one?
gonna have to come downstairs.
That one won't
They're
work
both out.
either? Oh, okay, I apologize. We're having a network failure of catastrophic proportions.
Okay, does this one work? Here we go.
Okay, here we go.
This is regard to the Greenway proposal. My name is Mike Raymond, and I live in Santa Rosa. In 1950, the highway east and west extension was on the plan, and as we're finding out, never went through. 1963 to 1964, Spring Lake was built right in the path of that proposed highway. In the late 90s or early 2000, there was an issue with the Highway 12 westbound traffic, with cars having to exit Hone Avenue, turn right onto Farmers Lane, and then merge left into the on-ramp to go westbound on 12. And at that time, the planner, his name was Mike, and I don't remember his last name, it was determined that the westbound bridge was proposed to alleviate the traffic issues at that intersection. Since that time, and during that time, more and more homes are building along the Highway 12 corridor, east of 101, and there's currently several housing projects that are being built or planned. The eastbound traffic on Highway 12 usually backs up to the fairgrounds 7 days a week, and sometimes almost all the way back to Highway 101. The current plan states that the level of the traffic of the intersection will continue to operate at the same level or increase. Farmers Lane will become unacceptable as far as traffic goes. With the increase in building and traffic since the westbound bridge over Farmers Lane was approved, I believe now is the time to build an eastbound bridge over Farmers Lane to help reduce the current traffic flow at the off-ramp at Farmers Lane by delivering several hundred or even 1,000 cars over the bridge to Hohen Avenue. We need to improve on highway infrastructure before we do more building east of 101 that will increase traffic. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Deborah Smith.
Good afternoon. I spoke with you last time you met. I'm a NASA scientist who works for a NASA data center in Alabama, and I work from home. Like my neighbor, Amelia and Scott, I live right near the proposed cell phone tower. And my office, which I've just finished construction on, is now in my garage, which is approximately 70 feet from the tower. I work at home and I live at home, so I will have 24-hour exposure. As a scientist, I look at the research to say what is out there. There's a lot of health issues that come up, and I'm wondering how the research shows any results. So I went and discovered some papers and started reading the research. What I'd like to share with you today, and I'll leave this with you, is a review paper of 23 papers. It's done by a university professor from the Department of Bioengineering at the University of Washington. It's entitled Biological Effects of Exposure to Electromagnetic Radiation Emitted by a Cell Tower Base Station and Other Antenna Arrays. I have 2 quotes I'd like to read you. While specific epidemiological research in this area is sparse and contradictory, and such exposures are difficult to quantify given the increasing background levels of radiation from a myriad of personal consumer products, some research does exist to warrant caution in infrastructure siting. Further epidemiological research that takes total ambient radiation exposures into consideration is warranted. Symptoms reported today may be classic microwave sickness, first described in 1978. And the second quote, both anecdotal reports and some epidemiology studies have found headaches, skin rashes, sleep disturbances, depression, decreased libido, increased rates of suicide, concentration problems, dizziness, memory changes, increased risk of cancer, tremors, and other neurophysiological effects in populations near base stations. So I hope you can understand why I am concerned that I will be living 24/7 very close to this proposed base station. And I appreciate your consideration, and please read this paper. It is very approachable. Thank
Great.
you.
Thank you. That's all the cards I have for public comment tonight. You don't have to have filled out a card. If there's anyone that wishes to speak on an item that is not listed as a public hearing, the Southeast Greenway is a public hearing tonight. Come on down. I'm not seeing anyone move, so I'm going to go ahead and close our public comment and move on to Planning Commissioner's report. Any reports by our Planning Commissioners? Okay. I just need to make one change. My understanding is Vice Chair Edmondson has to go off our what's been our ad hoc committee for the cannabis. You want to say something?
Yes, I was going to say that during statements of abstention, but I understand it's not an agenda item,
Okay,
so this is the right time to address it.
This
Yes,
would be it.
I'll be stepping off of that subcommittee, as Chair Sisko said, to avoid any appearance of conflict of interest in light of the law firm that I work at and the lines of business that they're pursuing. So I will no longer be on that subcommittee, and I won't be participating in our comprehensive cannabis ordinance vote, assuming that I remain at this current law firm.
Okay, great. And so because of Vice Chair needing to step down from that committee, I'm going to be replacing him with Commissioner Weeks. And I understand there may be a meeting called of the three of us. So that would be Karen Weeks, Commissioner Groninger, and myself as members of that ad hoc committee. Okay. So now we have a very special thing to do. So Ashley Crocker, if you wouldn't mind coming down to the front here so we can honor you. Great.
It's weird being right here.
So what we're doing tonight is we're giving a certificate of appreciation for Ashley Crocker, who served on our planning commission and had to exit, unfortunately. I think we could use you tonight. We got an ER. So with that, Ashley Crocker faithfully served on the Santa Rosa Planning Commission from February of 2014 through May of 2017, and served as vice chair from February of 2017 to May of 2017. During her incumbency, Ashley Crocker attended 39 sessions and was instrumental in several notable planning actions, including the Roseland Specific Plan and Annexation, the Willoughby's Use Permit, the Housing Element Update, shops at Austin Creek, interim medical cannabis cultivation ordinance, and use permits in numerous residential and major commercial projects. Throughout her tenure, Ashley Crocker exhibited excellence in her ability to discuss and clarify CEQA law in a manner of great benefit to the public and commission, while performing her duties in an outstanding manner, and gave unselfishly of her time through her public service efforts to help the people of Santa Rosa. So with that, I'm going to come down and give you this.
Thank you, Chair Sisko and commissioners. I really thank you very much for this recognition. It means an awful lot to me, and It was an absolute pleasure serving with you and with staff. Really a highlight of my professional career, so thank you all very much. I was disappointed to have to step down when I took a new job, but at the same time, change is good, and I know that the commission is in good hands, and welcome to new Commissioner Peterson and Commissioner Weeks as well, and we've lost our one viewer of the Planning Commission, Karen. So anyway, thank you all very much. I hope to have the chance to work together in a new capacity somewhere down the road. So thanks.
Don't leave yet. We may have some things to say to you. So would anybody like to say something to Ashley before we let her go? Vice Chair Edmondson.
It's great to see you back here with us. Unfortunately, on the wrong side of the dais as far as I'm concerned, but I'm really happy that so many members of the public were here to hear what Chair Sisko had to say and what you had to say, because it doesn't do justice to how excellent of a job you did, and along with the commissioners who were here when I came, you were so instrumental in showing me how to do this. And I was always so jealous of the depth and the quality of analysis that you put into everything. It wasn't just CEQA stuff, it was everything about a project. Total knowledge from start to finish and mastery, and a real awareness of what makes a city a great place to live in. So we're going to miss your intelligence and your incredible ability to do the job, your sense of humor, and hopefully somehow I'll see you back here again someday, but incredibly well-deserved debt of gratitude from me and from the whole city.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Appreciate it.
Anything else? Commissioner Romica.
I just want to say, Ashley, it was a real pleasure serving on the Planning Commission with you for 3 years, or 3+ years. And I, too, learned a lot from you. And I've always admired your thoroughness and your ability to take a look at issues, both from a matter of land use planning, equity, and efficiency as well. And you're always fair and objective. And I, as we all, greatly miss you not being on this planning commission. And I just appreciate the opportunity to have been able to serve with you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Commissioner Weeks.
I first got to know you when we were on the Open Government Task Force together. And at that time, I really appreciated how you looked at things, how you analyzed things and looked at things. And I think watching you then later, or even before that, at the Planning Commission as the one viewer, I, once again, as I said with Commissioner Stanley, you guys left big shoes to fill up here. And if I can be even a little bit as good of a planning commissioner as you are, I'll consider myself lucky.
Thank you, Commissioner Weeks.
Yeah, Commissioner Duggan.
Well, I second everything that everyone's said so far. And I miss you and your big sheaf of annotated paper, all the things you print out and all the careful notes and thoughtful questions you had, and your thoroughness, and just how comprehensive you are in everything that you reviewed. And we really could have used you tonight because we have this huge document. But we're glad that you've got a good job and you've moved on, but we miss you.
Thanks. Yeah, I never did master that whole iPad thing that you've got there.
Commissioner Peterson, you want to say anything? You didn't get the chance to serve with her, but...
Yeah. I mean, unfortunately, I didn't get a chance to serve with you, but I know I've got some very big shoes to fill, and I think you're a really excellent example of the best a planning commissioner can be.
And then I just have a couple more comments. I think it was your first meeting when we were doing Willoughby's, and yeah, and when we were doing our ex parte disclosures, and I learned that you, like me, drove all the way to Petaluma to visit the existing Willoughbys, I thought, yeah, this is good. You are very, very thorough. I think you taught us a lot about the importance of a really solid project description, and you really put Willoughbys through the paces in order to help us learn that, and you did just such an excellent job. And that was just the beginning. So you've always been really thorough, very reliable, and in all matters, not just the CEQA. But I always really appreciated how it's so hard for the public to understand what's a significant impact, and because everything seems significant if it's close to your neighborhood. And you were really good with the public in explaining those nuances. And yeah, I don't think we can replace you. And I will get Terry, so there.
Thank you, Chair Sisko.
Okay.
I miss being up there, and thank you guys again. So continue your good work. Thank you for your service.
Okay. Okay, so with that, we'll move on to department reports.
All right, good afternoon. I'll be brief. I know there's a lot of folks that took time out of their day to come tonight to speak on the item that we have. So looking forward to our future activities as a commission. I'm looking forward to, not this weekend, but next weekend when we kick off some conference training in Sacramento at the California American Planning Association's conference. So if you haven't confirmed your attendance on that, just let me know. We don't have to do it now, but if you can send me an email between now and then, that would be helpful. We can coordinate. Also looking forward to our next meeting, September 28th is our next regularly scheduled agenda. We do have something unique to that agenda, and that is a field trip. So we have 3 items that we've noticed hearings for on that September 28th calendar. Those will start at 4 o'clock as normal, but we are offering a field trip to one of the sites because it's quite difficult to navigate on your own. And that is that will be part of that noticed agenda, so obviously that's available to the public, but we'll deal with logistics about getting to that site. I'll get you the instructions for that. And then we'll, obviously we're quite busy in our office these days. You can count on all of your agendas being full. Let's see what else. I want to also give or before I go into update on some council goals and where we're at, just a quick response to some items that came up in public appearances. The comments you are receiving, we're also receiving on a staff level regarding the pending application of a cell tower. So that is a pending application. At some point, if it moves forward in the process, it will come before the Planning Commission. It's not scheduled or ready yet. It's still in issue resolution stage. The senior planner assigned to that project is Andy Gustafson. So I encourage members of the public to contact the planner facilitating that project to stay in contact. The other topic that was brought up was with regards to several homes in the city being converted to care facilities. So I did have a chance to meet with that gentleman. Well, we didn't meet, we had a conversation over the phone, and there will be some follow-up that I'll share with the commission just in terms of what that situation is like and if it has any relevance to the commission at this point in time or not. Then on to council goals and priorities. So as you know, Roseland is still in its annexation process. So we're hopeful, but the process still has some steps to make. But if those steps are successful, we are looking forward to a potential annexation active date of November 1st. And we'll keep you abreast of that progress towards that. In anticipation of being successful, obviously staff is getting ready to logistically bring Roseland into our jurisdiction, so we're ready, and we also have consistent and clear public messaging for what residents can expect. Looking at Housing Action Plan and Housing for All strategies, we are gearing up for a public workshop to be scheduled October 9th. We're looking at an appropriate venue for that. it's possible it'll be in the Finley Center. So we're going to be developing the agenda for that public workshop and finalizing the meeting details, but I want to just put that out there. We're looking at October 9th to convene with the public, a variety of stakeholders, talk about a slew of housing action plan initiatives. So instead of, we're concerned about going out independently with all of these when really they kind of work together. So issues related to density bonus, process improvements, inclusionary housing initiatives, and things like that. We're going to put that together and workshop with the collection of them. And then probably continue with that, take that collection again and do a public workshop in December as well. So you'll be notified when that solidifies. And then cannabis policy. So that's been still in the works. We've been receiving a lot of feedback on our draft policy. And as recent as this last Tuesday, staff met with the Council Policy Subcommittee and presented that feedback, themes of feedback that we had received, and asked for some direction on certain elements of the policy. So staff's going to be responding to that information in the next couple of weeks as we prepare for moving on to the Planning Commission, hopefully in October at this point. And so, yes, thank you. Sorry to see that you will step out of the subcommittee. We still need that subcommittee, so thank you for being quick to reappoint. I will be making contact with you to set up a meeting so I can give a briefing on where we're at status to date. It's quite comprehensive work that's been done to date, so it's great to have a working committee to just present information to in advance of a public hearing. And I also, our website to track cannabis policy and where we're at with subcommittee meeting information and direction that might have been provided is on our website, srcity.org/cannabis. And one of the things that we produced on Tuesday, this last Tuesday, was an update to our cannabis permits. So we're trying to produce these quarterly with the idea of monitoring what has been attracted to Santa Rosa in terms of land uses, in terms of applications, where are they locating, what's the mix of uses that we are attracting in terms of investment and moving forward in the process. And so that's what that does. And also it keeps track of how many permits have been approved to date. So that concludes my department report. Thank you.
Great. Statements of abstention by commissioners. Okay, seeing none. We'll go ahead and move on to our public hearing tonight, which is a public hearing on the draft environmental impact report for the Southeast Greenway. And it is marked as an ex parte disclosure. So anything to disclose, Commissioner Peterson?
I visited the site.
Okay.
I've visited the site in the past. I've not revisited it lately, and I have nothing to disclose.
Okay.
I visited the site, and I've had past meetings that I've disclosed at previous Planning Commission hearings with stakeholders, including project proponents, but I have nothing new to disclose.
Okay. Commissioner Donegan.
I've visited the site several times, and I have nothing further to disclose.
Commissioner Weeks.
I have also visited the site and nothing further to disclose.
And I also have visited the site in the past, met with stakeholders in the past, but have nothing new to disclose. So with that, Jessica Jones is staff, and will be giving the staff report.
Great. Thank you, Chair Cisco, members of the Commission. The project before you is consideration of the Southeast Greenway Draft Environmental Impact Report and proposed amendments to the general plan, zoning code, and rezoning for the site. Before I get into the presentation, I do want to note that it will not just be me up here presenting to you. I will be going over the location of the site, overall project description, and then the bit of the history that led us to today. We also have members of our consultant team, PlaceWorks, who will be going over the project itself and the draft EIR, and that is Bruce Brubaker and Terry McCracken. So, as I mentioned, the project before you is the Southeast Greenway project, and we are looking at the draft environmental impact report, or EIR, and the proposed amendments to the general plan, zoning code, and rezoning. The focus of tonight's meeting is on holding the public hearing to receive comments from the public on the draft EIR and amendments, and also to receive comments from the Planning Commission on those items. I do want to note that responses to comments on the draft EIR will not be provided tonight. Responses to comments on the EIR that we received tonight, and then also that we received throughout the 45-day public review period, which ends on October 4th, will be responded to in the final EIR, which will be coming back to the Planning Commission, we think, in mid-December. As outlined in the EIR, the implementation and potential adoption of the project would have the potential to result in just over 47 acres of parks and open space area, approximately 244 residential units, and about 12,000 square feet of commercial space. I do want to note that there is not a proposed project, development project, with this proposal that's before you. Again, it is simply amendments to the general plan, zoning code, and rezoning to allow for potential future development of this area. So the project site is located in southeast Santa Rosa. It covers approximately 57 acres that spans about 1.9 miles from Farmers Lane to Spring Lake Regional Park. The area is currently Caltrans right-of-way. It was formerly identified as a future extension of Highway 12. Caltrans is no longer interested in extending the highway in that direction, and so is now considering sale of the property. Because the area was right-of-way for a future roadway, there is no existing general plan land use designation or zoning for the site. As such, development couldn't happen on the site. So that is, again, why we are here tonight, to figure out appropriate general plan land use designations and zoning for this area. So this is an aerial of the project area. As you can see, it's all Greenway, which is the name of the project. It does not have any development on it. There are 3 streets that bisect this area: Franquette, Yulupa Avenue, and Summerfield Road, and then there is the Highway 12 on-ramp that runs through the property on the west side, adjacent to Farmers Lane. So, as I mentioned, I do want to go into a little bit of the project history before we get into the project itself. In October of 2011, the City Council adopted goals and strategic objectives that included acknowledging the Southeast Greenway community planning projects. Then in April of 2013, the Council reaffirmed the goal and strategic objective, specifically supporting efforts for the Southeast Greenway campaign. In June of 2014, the city joined the Southeast Greenway Community Partnership, which at that time consisted of the city, Sonoma County Water Agency, the Regional Parks Department, the Southeast Greenway Campaign, and Land Paths. Then in August of 2014, the California Transportation Commission adopted adopted a resolution to rescind the freeway adoption due to lack of operational need, local support, and funding. And that would then allow the land to be transferred to public ownership. In late 2014, the Sonoma Land Trust joined the partnership and is contributing expertise to an effort towards facilitating the future transfer of this land to public ownership. In July of 2015, the council approved a memorandum of understanding, or an MOU, between Caltrans, Sonoma Land Trust, and the partnership that documented how they would collaborate and work together toward the development of an agreement that would, again, transfer this area to public ownership. In October of 2015, the council initiated the general plan amendment, rezoning, and the development of the environmental impact report for the project. In June of 2016, The council approved a professional services agreement with Placeworks, which is our consultant, again, is here this evening, for preparation of the amendments and the draft, and the environmental impact report. Following that time, the community was engaged in the process of developing a vision for this area. The first meeting was held in August of 2016. There's about 200 participants that came to that workshop. And at that time, they worked on envisioning desired uses for the site. The second community workshop was held in October of 2016. There was about 150 participants at that workshop. And at that time, they were looking at considering and providing feedback on the draft guiding principles for the project, as well as 3 land use and circulation alternatives. Following that, there was the first of 2 joint meetings with the Planning Commission and City Council. It was held in November of 2016. At that time, the Commission and Council reviewed the draft guiding principles, the land use and circulation alternatives, and the results of the public outreach that was held. And then in March of 2017, the second joint meeting was held. And at that time, we were looking for feedback on the single preferred alternative for land use and circulation, as well as the proposed general plan amendment. At that point, in May of 2017, the work on the EIR began with a scoping meeting that was held to gather comments on the scope of the proposed EIR. So with that, I'm going to now hand it over to Bruce Brubaker, who's going to be going over the project with you, and then followed by Terry McCracken, who will go over the draft environmental impact report, and then I will come back to close it off.
Thanks, Jessica. It's a pleasure to be here in front of the commission. I know that many of the commissioners, not all of the commissioners, have been part of this process and review of the process of developing a plan for the Southeast Greenway. As Jessica mentioned, there was an extensive community outreach process as part of this project, one of the more extensive ones that we've been involved in, that had very good participation both in person and via online resources. The August 6th workshop had about 200 participants. It was held at Montgomery High School. There were, the outcome of that meeting, it was a visioning meeting, and the outcome was a lot of discussion and preferences for open natural spaces in the Greenway. There was also some interest in retail and housing. But there were also issues that were discussed, including concerns about safety, about parking, and about potential traffic issues and other issues that could come about via development of the Greenway. So all those preferences and issues that were highlighted were reviewed by the team and staff, and we developed 3 alternatives to proceed through further development. Let's see, I'm going to need some help. Jessica? Oh, maybe I do this. Okay, just hit that. Another workshop we held had the alternatives come back. It was an open house setting where we showed 3 alternatives and got good responses from the participants, including workbooks that they were able to state their preferences and work on their own preferred alternative. We had a similar exercise online that was responded to by nearly 400 people, where they could, online participants could also develop their own alternative. At the end of the process, we were asked to rank the preferred land uses and circulation through the process, and we got feedback on that. And then came to a joint session of the commission and council and presented all the background work. And most of you were at that commission meeting. The alternatives and also a set of guiding principles were considered, and direction was given about how to develop the preferred alternative further. So we returned and worked on that feedback and developed our preferred alternative. In March of this year, we returned to another joint session of the council and commission and got further feedback. In this case, we were presenting a single preferred alternative with guiding principles, and we got feedback on that. And that is what was turned into the general plan amendment that is under consideration. The general plan amendment has an illustrative map in it. It has a set of policies as part of it, but a lot of the detailed information about the vision that came out of the community input is actually in the project description of the EIR. The general plan amendment is a fairly simple, high-level amendment to the general plan that accommodates the vision in the general plan. But there's more illustrative detail actually in the project description of the EIR. So I'll describe the illustrative map for the preferred alternative, or the plan that's moving forward. The map is colored with different illustrative land uses, including, for the most part, housing in the far west near Farmers Lane, open space and natural uses, urban agriculture uses are threaded throughout the rest of the park from essentially Franquette all the way up to Spring Lake Park. There is another section of housing that's being shown along Yulupa on the north side of the Greenway, allowing half of the Greenway to remain green on the south side. There's also other uses such as a school facility used near Montgomery High School and areas of natural restoration. Some of the guidelines which then became policies in the general plan amendment proposal were to provide these policies. These guidances actually came from the Planning Commission and City Council, but they're key to the project. Provide a continuous greenway with separate bike and ped paths to connect to existing and planned bike and ped routes and especially into downtown, to address the need that the region has and the city has for new housing, to ensure that there's eyes on the greenway to enhance the safety and the well-being of people who use the greenway, to avoid changing the freeway off or on-ramp significantly. We had an alternative that had a fairly significant change, and the guidance was to avoid changing the freeway on-ramp too much, to maximize shared parking between the school and the greenway, between other uses and greenway, to restore the remnant orchards that exist there today, and to make sure the plan is financially feasible. So the general plan has a map and a text amendment to it. We have provided in the staff report, and it's online as well, the text of the proposed amendment to the general plan. And the new policies are shown in red, and any deletions of existing policies, should there be some, are struck out and also shown in red in that document. The elements that were actually changed included the land use and livability element, transportation, public services, and facilities. It also includes a brief description of the Southeast Greenway land use and circulation concept. That illustration map that I showed you is in the general plan. And then new goals and policies that address and implement the community's visions. This is the actual map that will become the general plan land use map. And it does not have all of the land uses shown on the illustrative map, because those are not general plan designation uses. Those are illustrative uses The general plan has far fewer, the palette of land uses that the general plan has is far fewer than those illustrative uses we were showing in our map that shows the overall concept. So the general plan is designated here with uses that allow those illustrative uses to happen. But the general plan doesn't have enough detail in it to say that needs to be natural resource, that's urban agriculture. Those designations actually don't exist in the general plan. But what does exist is this Parks and Recreation designation, which allows all of those uses inside it. So the land use designation for the Greenway is primarily Parks and Recreation, as you see here in green. And on the far west, there are a couple of designations that show housing, medium density residential, as well as a joint use, a joint land use, which is medium density residential overlaid on retail and business services use. The zoning also needs to be amended to incorporate the Southeast Greenway Plan. Currently, it's not zoned, just as the land is not currently designated under the general plan. It's just an empty space in the zoning code. So the zoning code being applied to the land uses are OSR, which is an open space recreation use. And then again, for the housing and the commercial, there are specific zones that are being designated that allow the uses identified in the vision to happen in the zoning. And we're happy to answer more specific questions about that should you have any. So now I'll hand it over to Terry McCracken, our Associate Principal in CEQA, to describe the EIR that was done on the illustrative plan, the general plan amendments, and the zoning change. Thanks.
See if I'm not as tall as you. Hi, my name is Terry McCracken. I'm happy to be here tonight, and I'm going to provide a summary of the California Environmental Quality Act, and I'm also going to provide a quick summary of the findings of, thank you, the draft environmental impact report. And I think, as Chair Cisco has already alluded to, CEQA can be a complicated law to try and understand. So hopefully I will just give this to you in a brief summary that we can process and understand. But one of the main things that I want to say about CEQA, which is the state's primary environmental protection law, is that it is a disclosure law. So this document that's in front of you, the intention of it is to disclose the environmental impacts of the proposed project. And an environmental impact report is just one of CEQA's mechanisms for allowing us to show you and share with you those impacts. Not only does the EIR need to identify the impacts on the environment, but it does need to fully identify mitigation measures to reduce those impacts and potentially avoid the significant impact. An EIR, which again is one of the highest levels of review you can do under CEQA, also requires that you evaluate alternatives to the proposed project. So in addition to the alternatives process that were described by Jessica and Bruce, the EIR looks at alternatives that are just looking at reducing environmental impacts on the environment. The environmental impact report must be certified by the lead agency prior to the approval of the project, but in certifying the EIR, that does not in and of itself approve the project. As part of the public process for the under CEQA and for draft EIR in particular, we do want to have what we're having here tonight, which is the public hearing that allows people to come forward and provide comments. And a lot of these things Jessica alluded to at the beginning of her presentation as well. No action will be taken on the draft EIR tonight, and no responses to comments will be provided tonight. But each comment will be responded to in writing as we go on with the next phase under CEQA, which is to prepare the final environmental impact report. Comments will be received throughout the 45-day period, which again has already been stated, ends on October 4th. So if you learn information tonight or you need a little bit more time to process the environmental impact report, you still have some time to review and provide your comments. This slide is just a kind of an example of how you can provide your comments. You can give them verbally tonight. You can also fill out a comment card and just submit that comment card. That will find its way to us through Jessica. You can mail your comments to Jessica at this address provided here to the City of Santa Rosa, and you can also email the comments. We just ask that you do include the subject line, Southeast Greenway EIR, so that doesn't get lost, and we can sort that out. We do encourage you, although it's not required, to submit your comments in writing so that nothing gets lost in translation between the intent of your comment and what we may interpret it to be. So the EIR that was prepared for this particular project is what's considered a program level EIR, and that is looking at a big, long-range plan. It's an appropriate level document when we're looking at a series of actions or policies, but we're not looking at any project-specific. We're not going to break ground. There's no construction level details associated with this project. And so again, it doesn't look at it. But however, the program level EIR does go through the same process as a project level EIR. So what is shown on this slide is just giving you a little bit of a look at the public process that is involved. The shaded cells on here indicate where the public has opportunity to comment throughout the public process. So we started this process back in April, which we issued a notice of preparation, which identified that we were in the process of preparing an EIR, and we allow people, well, it really invites members of the public or any interested parties to provide what they think the content should be of the draft EIR, what should be evaluated. We had a scoping meeting for that EIR in which we had a number of people come out and provide their input on what should be evaluated in the EIR. All of those comments and the ones that we recorded verbally are included in an appendix to the EIR, so you can see that your comment was addressed and included as part of the review process. A little bit more about this slide. The middle shaded area shows that where we are in the process. We're about halfway through, so we're in the 45-day public review period where we're commenting on the draft EIR. Following October 4th, when all the comments are received, we will start to respond to those comments and make any necessary revisions. And then that final environmental impact report will come back to you with any revisions and responses to all of the comments that were received. And then that will be part of the document that comes before you to consider certification of the EIR and approval of the project. I did say consideration of. I did not mean to imply you would be doing that then. So this slide is just showing you that this was a fully scoped EIR. So we covered all of the environmental impact categories required under CEQA. So it's kind of a long list. I'm not going to read it to you, but it is comprehensive, and it is a big document, and each one of these categories has its own standards of significance that we're looking at for environmental impacts. So these next few slides are going to just go over the conclusions that we made and go over the findings of each one of the topics. So the first couple of categories on here are under the no impact category, and this is really just due to the location of the project site. There are no agricultural resources as viewed under CEQA as prime agricultural land. There's no forestry or mineral resources, and so these topics were dismissed as having no impact, and we didn't do detailed evaluation of those, which CEQA allows. Less than significant impacts are the primary source here, so most topics were not found to be have a significant impact. And these are topics that mostly rely on plans, policies of the general plan. Municipal code has regulations in place, and there are other state regulations that future projects under the plan would have to comply with that would reduce those impacts and ensure less than significant levels. So these are the categories where we didn't have to proceed forward with no mitigation measures were required. So on this slide represents the categories for biological resources, cultural and transportation and circulation, where we were able to introduce kind of long-term mitigation measures that future development under the plan would have to comply with to reduce these categories to a less than significant level. And the EIR did conservatively find 2 significant and unavoidable impacts in the air quality discussion and transportation and circulation. So I'll go over each one of these in a little more detail on the following slides. So with respect to biological resources, we found that there could be potentially significant impacts to some special status species, the California red-legged frog, a numerous potential for identified plant species, the list a little bit too long here, and that can change over time. And then there are state laws and federal laws in place, particularly the Migratory Bird Treaty Act, that protects nesting birds, and these can occur, change conditions over time, and then the same with wetlands. So the mitigation measures that were implemented for biological resources are really focused on protocol level surveys to be conducted at the time that future development is proposed, because these conditions can change. And so that's what these mitigations are looking at. And so we found that with implementation of those standards, these impacts to these species and to the special sensitive habitat could be reduced to a less than significant level. The same thing is true for cultural resources. While there's no historic or any of the resources listed here identified on the site at this time, we find that future construction on the project site could disturb the ground, which could uncover or disturb an unknown species, an unknown finding. So the mitigation, again, gives you kind of a step-by-step procedure to follow, to comply with, to make sure impacts are less than significant to cultural resources. So for transportation, I think I did want to point out one more thing on less than significant with mitigation. We did have an air quality impact that could be reduced to less than significant through implementation of future health risk assessments. If you have a construction project that's within 1,000 feet of a sensitive receptor, so that was a mitigation measure we did identify as well. But going on to the next slide, for transportation and circulation, there's numerous things that this chapter has to look at in terms of vehicular impacts and level of service impacts, but also multimodal, thinking about bicycles and pedestrian safety. So in this chapter, we did identify that there is one intersection that can be reduced to the standard that the city finds acceptable for level of service if we were to install a light. And this is the intersection that's described on here at the Hohen Avenue and Franquette Avenue intersection. And this impact was just found during the AM peak hour. We also found that there are 4 crosswalks that Bruce kind of showed you earlier in the illustrative map that could be part of this project that would have the implications of putting pedestrians and automobiles and the interface together. And so we did list some mitigation measures at these 4 crossways that would reduce any kind of impacts and ensure that the pedestrian crossways were designed and constructed in a way that would result in safety for all, both vehicles and pedestrians and bicycles. So the EIR did conservatively find significant and unavoidable impacts with relationship to air quality and, again, some of the transportation-related impacts. I call this a conservative finding because there are mitigation measures and other measures identified that could reduce the impact. However, under CEQA, if you cannot implement that mitigation measure for a number of reasons, you need to disclose that this is considered a significant and unavoidable impact at this stage. It doesn't mean that as future projects come forward, they can't, on a case-by-case basis, reduce the impact to a less than significant level. And that's what the case is with air quality mitigation. Exceeding the criterion standards for toxic air emitters or for exceeding the Bay Area Management District's standards for significance are really determined on a project-by-project basis as they come forward. And so we have mitigation measures identified that would require future projects to comply with these rules, but because the details of those projects are not known at this time, this EIR finds them to be significant and unavoidable. But that doesn't mean that, again, like when the project comes forward, they can't reduce their specific contribution to a less than significant level. And this is the same case for transportation and circulation. We found that at the Farmers Lane, State Route 12 eastbound off-ramp, at Hohen Avenue during the PM peak hour, and different segments along the Farmers Lane corridor were again determined to be significant and avoidable. But the city does have long-range plans for the Farmers Lane extension project, and also there could be some long-range plans that would affect both the Farmers Lane corridor and this particular intersection, that once those were implemented, impacts could be reduced. However, there is not funding at this time for that particular improvement. Environmental review for that particular improvement, because it's an off-site impact, has not been conducted to date. And also because there will be some coordination with Caltrans. So the EIR appropriately finds impacts at these particular intersections and areas to be significant and unavoidable at this time. But again, it doesn't necessarily mean that they can't be mitigated at a future time. So in addition to, like I said, identifying mitigation measures to try to reduce impacts, when you have to prepare an EIR, you do need to look at alternatives to your proposed project. And in this case, the EIR evaluated 4 projects. First was the CEQA required no project, which we have to look at the conditions as if nothing were to be developed or built. And we also looked at one that looked at no commercial or residential development. There would just be open space and parks. And then we looked at one that just took away the commercial development but kept the residential. And then we looked at a 4th alternative that basically kept everything the same but reduced the number of residential units from 244 to 122, so just a 50% reduction. Naturally, all of these reduce the amount of development potential on the land, so they do reduce the impacts. Under CEQA, we don't do a quantitative analysis of each one of these alternatives. We qualitatively compare to the impacts of the proposed project. So the statement is that the impacts under these alternatives would be less than those of the proposed project and would likely result in similar impacts. Because CEQA asks that you identify the environmentally superior alternative, this is really just another disclosure rule to illustrate and identify up front which one results in the least amount of impacts. And in this case, we found that the no commercial, no residential alternative to be environmentally superior. You can identify the no project one, which makes the most sense to be environmentally superior, but CEQA has a rule that says if that's your environmentally superior, you choose the next one that is more or equal to that. Because the proposed project includes, and as part of the objectives and the preferred land use alternative included commercial and residential housing on it, we identified that none of these alternatives fully meet the project objectives as the same level of detail as the preferred land use that was evaluated as the proposed project under this document. So that kind of concludes my summary of the document. And I'm going to pass this back over to Jessica, that's just going to give you the rest of how the hearing is going to proceed.
Okay, so just to finish up the presentation here quickly, because I know everybody's probably tired of hearing from us. As Terry just mentioned, there are significant and unavoidable impacts that are identified in the environmental impact report. In order for the Planning Commission to recommend and the City Council to ultimately approve the project, they would need to also include in their approval a statement of overriding consideration, and that is a statement that identifies overriding positive aspects of the project that outweigh the potential impacts to the environment that are identified in the EIR. And so again, that would need to be part of the record of the project approval when it gets to the City Council. Just to go over the Planning Commission's role, which I think we've kind of talked about a little bit. So we are reviewing the draft EIR and the proposed amendments. At this meeting, we will be holding and closing a public hearing, receiving comments from both the public and the Planning Commission on the draft EIR and the proposed amendments. At a subsequent meeting, which at this point we're targeting the mid-December meeting, I think it's December 14th, it is tentative at this point, The Planning Commission will at that time be considering making a recommendation to the City Council on certification of the EIR, as well as adoption of the amendments and rezoning, and then also, as I mentioned, including those statements of overriding consideration. So one thing I wanted to mention before we conclude, there was an issue that came up towards the end of this process related to the proposed land use, the proposed general plan land use designations for this project. As was mentioned, there are basically 3 general plan land use designations proposed, 2 that are mixed use designations, 1 that is a medium density residential designation, and then the rest, which covers about 47 acres, is proposed as recreation and parks. That designation was chosen because it is it most closely matches the vision that came out of the community process, as well as the Joint Planning Commission City Council. It matches the diagram that is proposed to be included in the general plan, the illustrative map. It allows all of the uses that are included in that, all the recreation uses, the plaza, the gardens, as well as the open space areas. This came up as an issue because the city has not historically designated sites that to recreation and parks until such time as the city owns a property and it is being planned for a park. That is because typically there's an existing general plan land use designation and existing uses on the site. And what we don't want to do is render an existing use on a property non-conforming by way of general plan. In this particular situation, it's very unique because, as I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, the property does not currently have a general plan land use designation. So we have to select one at this time. If we were to select any other general plan land use designation other than recreation and parks, it was determined that it would be inconsistent with the vision that came out of this process, as well as the proposed text amendments to the general plan. So because of all of that, staff is recommending that recreation and parks land use designation. So finally, getting into next steps. So we are in, as was mentioned a couple times, we are in the 45-day public review period for the draft EIR. Began on August 21st. It will conclude on October 4th. We are looking for written comments, preferably, but we will be taking the oral comments today. And then comments need to be submitted to me by October 4th. We are, over the next couple months, we will then be providing responses to those comments in the final EIR and putting together a package for the Planning Commission, again, which we hope to bring forward in December. And then ultimately this will move on to the City Council, which we anticipate to be probably the end of January, beginning of February. So with that, the Planning and Economic Development Department is recommending that the Planning Commission conduct the public hearing and provide comments on the draft EIR and the proposed amendments and rezoning. So we're happy to take questions, and I'm going to leave this slide up so that people have my contact information for submittal of written comments.
Okay. In an earlier conversation with Ms. Jones, we agreed we'd have the opportunity, the Planning Commission, if you have clarifying questions regarding the staff report or the project, we could go ahead and ask those. Technical comments and comments on the project we'll do after the public hearing. So any need to clarify anything at this point? Great. Okay. So with that, we're going to go ahead and move on to the public hearing for the public to comment on the draft EIR. And my first speaker is Stephen Barnhart. And again, this is the only microphone working. You have 3 minutes. Please watch the light bar as it goes down so that you can conclude your comments.
Yes, my name is Stephen Barnhart, and I've lived at my current residence since 1970 and have raised my children within a quarter of a mile of this piece of land and have envisioned it for many years as being something other than a weed patch. I've long desired that this would be turned into some sort of a recreational and educational facility. My background as a biologist and a teacher has really emphasized the desire to see it have great educational impact on the schools in the vicinity. I support the preferred alternative for the project, and I have reviewed Section 4.3, the biological resources, and the supporting document known as Appendix C. And I find this section 4.3 to be entirely adequate for the regard to possible impacts and mitigation. However, I would like to say that the unique feature of this project involves restoring degraded natural habitat rather than preserving habitat that is subject to some sort of development. Thus, it is obvious that, that subsequent to the approval of the CIR, planning for the restoration of currently severely degraded habitats within this 47 acres will be required. And these include, and I have looked at this areas for some time, woodlands, wetlands, riparian corridors, and grasslands. My goal is to identify areas of restoration preparation that can follow this report into the future specific planning process. And they include the following. 1, the location and possible boundaries of all wetlands and riparian habitats should be identified well enough that the proposed pathways, recreation facilities, housing, and commercial uses can be located to avoid impacts on these sites. 2, this includes the marsh site between Boulder Lane and Slate Drive east of Summerfield, as well as other wetlands which provide opportunities for groundwater recharge, which would meet Santa Rosa City goals. 3, since the Greenway and the creek channels serve as a wildlife habitat and movement corridors for deer and a variety of birds and other species, restoration should fully address all potential impacts on wildlife in the area. And as a biologist, I would add this should include studies of gene flow and exchange. 4th, maximizing native plantings and habitat restoration should be considered in the areas designated open space, creek restoration, and greenway, including areas for picnics and other public uses. And 5th, Section 4.3 is largely dependent upon the study included in Appendix C, as I said earlier. The field survey portion.
Mr. Barnhart, I'm sorry you ran out of time.
Okay.
But please submit your comments in writing, the rest of them, whatever we did,
Okay.
all of it, but
Well, I was
definitely.
just about done. That's
Okay, great, thank you. Okay, next is Susan Bennett. And Ms. Bennett is going to be followed by Bob Harder, if you want to get ready.
Good afternoon. My name's Susan Bennett, and I live at 1354 Yalupa Avenue. I'm part of the Yalupa co-housing community, and I've been there about a year and a half. And part of the reason that I chose to buy the condominium I did a year and a half ago was because I knew about the Greenway and the possibility of it being developed into parks and recreation area. I come from Chicago and lived on the north side of Chicago. If you're familiar with that, there are parks all the way along the eastern side of Chicago that people use every day, many people. I, for one, the years that I lived there, walked and jogged and took my children there to play soccer. There's a bird sanctuary, there's a golf course, there's bike paths, and I rode my bike along there. And so envisioning that kind of park right next to where I was living really made a difference in my interest in purchasing this property and being a part of the community. And so I encourage you to go forth with this plan, and I really commend everyone who's been participating in this for many years to get it to this point. And thank you for this, and look forward to working together to make this happen. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Bob Harder, and he will be followed by Thea Hensel.
Thank you. My name is Bob Harder. Generally, I haven't been following this until this weekend when a friend of mine who lives in the area, who knows I've worked with the city and for the city as an employee for over 40 years on land use and infrastructure and permit streamlining, never again, and asked me to look at it to see what I saw with regard to traffic. So all my comments are just related to 413 traffic, okay? So I flipped through a lot of the pages, so I got blurry on the internet page, but I saw a number of things that have already been mentioned. I'm just going to highlight them for you, and I'll leave you a written summary. Okay?
Great, thank you.
First red flag to me was something that doesn't comply with the general plan. In this case, it was just the levels of service for traffic, which doesn't really comply now, and it's going to comply worse in the future. Okay. I personally think that can be resolved with a recommendation I'm going to make. There's a number of other adverse traffic impacts, which even with mitigations are still significant. And you saw there were a number of significant and unavoidable ones listed. I think they are avoidable by some recommendations I'll offer to you. Levels of service, generally E. This general plan wants them to be D, which is only frustrating. And E is and F. Some of the intersections go to F under this proposal, is road rage in my mind. Okay, but I try to behave. Okay. A lot of the solution for traffic issues, as pointed out in the EIR, are kind of hinged, the hopes are hinged on the Farmers Lane extension being complete. And all the traffic models that were run were with the assumption that that's going to be complete. And I think, probably not in my lifetime, but probably in the lifetime of Rob Sprinkle, the transportation director, it will be, okay? And I'll look down from heaven and be happy it is. But it's not going to happen Tuesday or by Christmas or anything. It's a long way off. Environmental, there's dozens of property owners from whom land acquisition has to be made for right away. And so it's not going to happen real soon. So that makes me think the solution with that included is a little bit unrealistic in the near term, and the EIR says so. The EIR also points out that that intersection has a highest collision rate.
Sorry, Mr. Harder, if you could do your comments in writing, that would be great. Yeah,
so
thank
I
you.
make a proposal in this that I'll leave you, Jessica.
Perfect.
And, I think we'll resolve.
Great, thank you for
Most
your
of those
time.
things. Thanks.
Next is Thea Hensel, and she will be followed by Dwayne DeWitt.
Hi, my name is Thea Hensel. I'm co-chair of the campaign committee, and I want to thank Chairman Cisco and the commission members for letting us all be here today and sitting through, I know it was a 400-page tome, and just the environmental addendum was another 400 pages, so I don't blame you if you haven't read every single page of it. I wanted to thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak in support of the draft EIR presented today. It's a culmination of years of visioning, input from the community, and the dogged work of many people. A special thanks to all of you who have weighed in on this project and given us suggestions, asked extremely thoughtful questions, and made strong and positive recommendations to all of us as we've moved through the process. What we've got before us is a plan that meets the needs and the desires of so many of the residents of Santa Rosa and also beyond, as well as building security for what's to come in the future. It's broad-based, it's inclusive, and it offers significant guidelines for direction, for development, and restoration in the future. We often said it's difficult to predict the needs of the city in 20 years, but this plan offers the opportunity for that flexibility to do just that. As a spokesperson for the grassroots organization and component of this public-private partnership, I want to thank all of the professionals who have guided us through this process through the 9 years we've been working on it. Our partnership, as mentioned before, of County Water Agency and Regional Parks, City of Santa Rosa, Land Pass, and Sonoma Land Trust all deserve a big thank you for the time and expertise that they have lent to this project. We especially want to give kudos to PlaceWorks because they've been respectful in listening to every constituent affected with this project and responded dutifully to it. Last but not least, the biggest shout out goes to the Planning and Economic Development Department of the city. So we give special thanks to David Gouen and Jessica Jones. Personnel has changed through the years, and each staff member at individual times we've gone through this has been welcoming, willing to work with us and our group, and truly interested in making this vision happen. So I just want to reiterate again that as the community-based Greenway group, we totally support this plan and hope you will too.
Great, thank you. Dwayne DeWitt.
I'd like to use the overhead projector, please.
Hello, my name is Dwayne DeWitt. I'm from Roseland, but I spend a lot of my life over in this part of town too. And since Howard and June Mose were first talking about this, I've always been following it. I am concerned that the proposed EIR is inadequate, and I have these reasons. I'd like the record to show that I have said that. This is a map of the existing land use and shows what's possible. And concerning residential, I attended the meetings, and in a city of close to 880,000 people within the urban growth boundary now, you only have about 400 people involved in a meager community engagement type of thing. You say it's good, it's the best you've had, but it's really not a lot when you think about it. It's been a limited kind of exclusive process that did not look at maximal housing opportunities, even though people brought that up at the meetings and asked about it. You only have 244 units of multifamily proposed right now. And I believe that this is part of the problem for it being inadequate, that you should perhaps put in an alternative that shows higher residential densities in spots along this greenway. This could be very helpful in the future because there may be some developers who will come forward and say, well, you know, we've looked at this and we'd like to put some other housing along here or up along here and other places. And there's also the opportunity that people would perhaps try to get that density bonus that comes with providing seniors housing and low-income housing in our state. So I'm hoping that you folks will perhaps ask them to look at increased housing opportunities at the sites and to do a perhaps greater outreach to the community, especially those who are of different ethnic backgrounds. When I talked about this over in Roseland, people said, oh, that's the OWG project. And I was like, oh, what do you mean? That's old white guys. Everybody on this thing is old white guys. And I said, well, I'm one. And they said, yeah, but you're poor, dude, and you came from this side of the tracks. He said, over there, they've pretty much been trying to make this an exclusive kind of nice park for their backyard and not really looking at it for getting more residents, especially people of modest means. So simple homes for people of modest means along that greenway would be a better service to the greater Santa Rosa community. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. DeWitt.
I'll turn this off and leave early so you know I'm not just here burning it up.
Okay. I don't have any other cards on this item, but you don't have to have filled out a card. If there's anyone else wishing to speak, come on down. And if you'd begin by giving your name for the record, that helps us. Thanks.
Yes, absolutely. Good afternoon, Chair Cisco and members of the Commission. Thank you for the opportunity to comment today. My name is Ann Krelock. I'm a Senior Environmental Specialist with the Sonoma County Water Agency. And I'll be the lead CEQA person for the Water Agency on this project. The Water Agency has been a partner in the Southeast Greenway planning efforts since 2014, when we signed on to the mutual letter of intent and joined the partnership. The vision that has resulted from several years of collaboration between the city, the Southeast Greenway Campaign, and other government agencies, nonprofits, community groups, and neighbors is an example of the out-of-the-box thinking that our community needs. So congratulations on taking another very big step toward implementing this vision. We look forward to continuing this collaboration to explore opportunities to pursue multi-benefit efforts in the Greenway that could help improve the health of our watersheds. Long-term preservation of recreational open space along the Greenway could provide opportunities to enhance and improve local water management strategies, a concept that the Water Agency would certainly support. So right now, we're currently reviewing the draft EIR, and we'll share any other questions or comments with city staff before the end of the review period. So thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak on the draft EIR? Come on down. And if you'd state your name for the record and push the light bar, please.
Sorry. Push which bar?
The light bar, it'll go from green to yellow to red. It just alerts you when you're running out of time. Yeah.
Excellent, yeah. So my name is Chris Gunther. I live in Montgomery Village near the Greenway and have been involved on and off with the campaign. And I just wanted to take the opportunity to just restate my support for the Greenway, which I think carries significant benefits for my family and families in the community near the Greenway. I have had the opportunity to live in a number of different places over the years, and I've always felt that, I've observed that really great natural and civic spaces are kind of the backbone of any great community. And I think that this project in particular and the alternative that's been presented will have significant economic and civic benefits for the area, which I think will have a beneficial systemic effect on the kinds of housing development and economic development that would benefit both the nearby community and the region as a whole. So I'm just a big proponent for the project and think it would be great. So I want to add as well that I don't think that the EIR, raises any issues that would significantly change that assessment or would override any of those benefits. So I think it should be full speed ahead.
Great, thank you.
Thanks.
Anyone else wishing to speak on this? Okay, not seeing anyone move, so I'm going to go ahead and close the public hearing and bring it back to the commission for our opportunity to do comments. And Commissioner Duggan, you look like you have some, so how about you start?
I don't have very many. One thing that came up from one of the commenters, Mr. Harder, who spoke about the traffic, I just wanted to confirm, was the traffic model actually based on the Farmers Lane extension? Yeah, okay.
For long term.
I wasn't clear on that from what I saw in the documents. I just wanted to make sure that that was a thing or not.
Yes, so it was considered in the model.
So do you want the rest of my comments?
Yes, go for it. You get to do yours, and then we'll move on.
All right. You also want comments on the zoning and the general plan text changes as well? So the only thing I have on, let's see, I'll just go through my note cards here. So the different policies in the different areas of the general plan, it's basically under land use and the transportation goals. And there's a couple that talk about different parking like shared parking agreements and that kind of thing. Some of they're not worded the same way, and if there was more kind of cohesion the way they're worded, might be a little bit clearer. And it's like policy LUL 004 and LULPP4. And I think there was one more under the transportation. Yeah, TN5. And then also, so under the zoning text changes that are proposed, it's very clear that the open space and recreation district, the table has been amended, so basically there will be no housing uses that would be permitted in the OSR areas. And I think that's great. But I wanted to make that point that I think under aesthetics, there was discussion about potential housing developments could be up to like 45 feet in height in the OSR areas. And so it wasn't in jive with the text changes under the zoning code. So that's actually an ERR comment, but sorry, I'm not more sort of coherent here. So just if it could be taken out of or clarified in the aesthetic chapter, that would be great, that there actually won't be housing allowed per the zoning code text changes that are proposed. And also, let's see. And thanks for the clarification on the significant and unavoidable impacts and how going forward each element of the project could be, there'll be mitigations added that could actually reduce any potential significant and unavoidable impacts to less than, because it seemed a little bit hard to understand that without an actual project that we actually could have significant and unavoidable impacts if going forward we can mitigate all those things out. Let's see. So on real specific questions, in the Appendix B, which I think is air quality and greenhouse gas emissions, page 71, there's a table that includes annual vehicle miles traveled, all uses is 728,542 miles. And then in the traffic study, there's a different number, and I think it's the number of VMT projected for the residential uses. And my question is whether this 721,000 number is connected to the one that's in the traffic part of the study. If they have any relationship at all, if this includes all users, if this is a yearly total of just the residential component. Let's see. Okay, let's see. I'm trying to figure out. Have anything else? And then also, under greenhouse gas emissions, table 4.6.-5 on 4.6-18, it's got project greenhouse gas emissions, talks about on-road mobile sources, and does that include like all road users, including all the potential visitors to the greenway who might arrive in cars? Or is that just also the people who live in the proposed project areas? And I think that's it. Otherwise, I want to say, like, it's a pleasure to read a super comprehensive, thorough document that has taken so much time. And I know we've had personnel changes at the city and how it seemed to be like a flawless, seamless effort. And thank you for all your hard work. And otherwise, that's all I got.
Vice Chair Edmondson, your comments?
I want to pay a compliment to the consulting team and to the city staff. It was a really well done EIR, really, really thorough. Thanks for all your hard work, and appreciate the praise from the public for all of the outreach and involvement. That's always, of course, critically important to these projects, and making sure they go smoothly and that the city ends up with the project that will stand in good stead going forward. Trying not to comment on things that are too minute, and I'll put those in writing. But I have in the past supported, of course, the continuous Greenway vision, and I'm glad that that is very much part of this final project. And I understand that the areas east of Summerfield, for instance, there are wetlands and environmental concerns, and so housing sites are limited. There's the failure of streets to stub out in the central section, so sites are limited. I understand these things, but we do need to sort of look at the amount of housing, and it's been gone over, and it's not time to relitigate all of that. But when it comes to the largest parcel, which is going to be zoned general commercial, and the land use policies that are proposed for that, the general plan land use policies that require mixed-use development, it reads on paper to me like that's going to safeguard the certainty that a certain number of residential units are going to be built. But we had a project not very long ago at all where on a transit village medium piece of property, in association with a project on another piece of property, that lo and behold, it ended up with a parking lot on it and no housing units. So I'm just wondering how ironclad the protections are, making sure that housing is a mandatory aspect of any project of any appreciable size that goes on that property, because it seems like it's pretty easy to do an end run around some of these general plan goals. And especially when it's general commercial, developer might see that and think, oh, it's an afterthought, or oh, I can get around it. I don't know whether there's a zone that would be more suited to it, and I understand that many people, Councilmember Combs and others, have said, maybe this site isn't necessarily so suitable for residential, and I understand why she says that and why many people have said that. It is on Highway 12. Nevertheless, we have a very large piece of property that is in the middle of a city with a dire housing crisis. It's very transit accessible. It's very near infrastructure and shopping. So I think we need to protect the ability to get well thought out housing projects there, instead of find ourselves 10 years from now with a cell phone store and God knows what else, commercial development only. That is the main comment that I have about the project. I think that the park is going to be wonderful. It's going to be so great. I grew up on Dartmouth Drive, and those of you who were here at the other meetings, you know this already, and I'm sure you're bored by it. But I've thought about this land since I was 4 years old. Maybe not that young. I wasn't that nerdy, but a little bit older than 4 years old, and hoped it would become something like this. And through the tireless efforts of so many people in this room and elsewhere, it's become a reality. God knows how much longer it would have taken without the efforts of everyone. And I think that this vision is going to be played out. And it's not going to be there on the ground for another while, but in terms of all the hoops to jump through, it's almost done. And so it should take a tremendous sense of accomplishment from it. And I'm very, very grateful for all the people who've put the effort into it. We have a terrible housing crisis in the city. With this piece of land, with the geography that it has, it's not necessarily the land that we're going to take to solve the housing crisis, but we need to keep in mind that some gentle increased densities in the future, when we look at the general plan again, for the already urbanized areas on the east side of Santa Rosa, where I grew up, are going to be necessary to have a fair and equitable way of growing up the city and making it less economically segregated and have more people have access to this wonderful park. Thank you.
Commissioner Kronika, your comments?
Have just a few comments here. First of all, general assessment of the documents that we've been reviewing is that they're quite clear. They reflect the preferred alternative, which I prefer. And I thank everybody involved for their good work. I also appreciate the explanation in various locations of the difference in the need for a program level EIR versus the more specific project level EIR, and especially as that relates to the mitigations or potential mitigations on those, I think the five items that require mitigation work or designated as significant and unavoidable. I certainly understand those, and I do believe they're all mitigatable. However, I think it would probably be worthwhile for a little clarity. Maybe it's repetitious in a couple of areas as well, and that would relate, well, specifically on some of the mitigations, required mitigations, that on both the air quality one, a little clarification might be necessary, at least as the way I read the construction. I think it's AQ2, that those are typically temporary matters, in other words, during construction, but as it reads, that as well as probably, for at least my purposes, a clearer definition of what an operational measure is, that they'd be looked at both in terms of, or at least clarification as to whether they're temporary. The construction, I assume, is during construction you have to disturb things, and that would have temporary impacts. The operations I'm not so certain of, but in all cases I assume that they will be addressed in the project EIR, project planning stages. I think that's helpful. The other point, without getting terribly specific, but I did appreciate, I think it was in section 4.2, pages 30 through 36, when I found it, that the following comment, and I believe this related to AQ2, but I believe it also relates to the other proposed mitigations, or those measures. And I'll quote, "It should be noted that the identification does not preclude the finding of less than significant impacts for subsequent projects that comply with Bay Area Air Quality Management District screening criteria or meet applicable levels of significance." All I'm suggesting here is that we bring those sorts of statements a little up front so it isn't quite so daunting when you first see the significant unavoidable consequences. I think it may help people understand that, one, we will be addressing those specifics, but secondly, that they are mitigatable per requirements. Then this is more a question, and obviously it doesn't have to be answered tonight, but in the statement of overriding considerations, would it be possible, getting back to the proposed mitigations or required mitigations, measures, that they be addressed, at least inside that statement of overriding considerations? In other words, that given certain project completions, whatever it may be, I'm thinking Farmers Lane in particular, at this point, that though we may at this point in time need to do overriding considerations in the future related to project specific, that we do feel that they are all potentially mitigated to the less than significant measure. That may be overkill, I don't know, but it seems like it would help and be clarifying as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Weeks.
Excuse me. I first want to say that I felt the document was very clear. It was easy to understand and easy to digest the information. I do have the same question about the Farmers Lane or the extension and the fact that some of the comments were based upon that being completed, and who knows when that will be completed. So somehow clarify, as Commissioner Groninger said, clarify that. Also, I want to echo what Commissioner Edmondson said about housing, and I know that ship has probably sailed, but if somehow in the future, if some of the areas adjacent to the Greenway, if you look at rezoning, at whatever, to provide more housing in that area.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Peterson.
Well, first I'd like to thank everyone for all the hard work that has obviously gone into the draft EIR, the city staff, all of the people involved with the Southeast Greenway campaign and the other city and county agencies involved. I want to echo a lot of Commissioner Edmondson's concerns. As I read the public comment and heard the public comments given tonight, I saw two big themes come out of that. One was a demand for more, and especially more affordable housing. And two, and I think related to that, is a concern with traffic, in the sense that traffic has an effect on pedestrian safety, the walkability of a neighborhood, the integration of the neighborhood within the broader sort of Santa Rosa area. And in light of one of the project's goals, which is LULOO, to develop the Southeast Greenway to support a walkable, livable neighborhood, promote economic vitality, and encourage social equity. I think it's important that, sort of in a broader sense, any project that's implementing this vision does have that focus on housing, affordable housing, a walkable neighborhood with services that are available without having to get into a car. And I think as we shift, hopefully, towards neighborhoods like that, we won't have to deal quite as much with the reliance on a proposed, project, the Farmers Lane extension that's coming at some point, but not in the near future. So with that, I again want to thank everyone for their hard work.
Great, thank you. Yeah, I also thought this was a very clear, well-written EIR, very easy to follow, and most of my questions really are outside the EIR, kind of more for staff to address, potentially, I guess, at the staff report level next time. I also appreciate, because one of the concerns that I had was at the study session, for those of us that were at the study session, we were told that the illustrative model was going to be actually new land uses in the general plan. And so I really appreciate both staff's discussion of that and Mr. Brubaker's discussion of how that transitioned to something much more reasonable for a general plan while preserving what the community worked on. And so I appreciate that explanation. One of the questions that I have, it's similar to what Commissioner Vice Chair Edmondson is asking about, would be to look at LUL-00-1, where it talks about the mix of residential. It says residential uses are required, lodging uses are allowed. We've just gone through an example of an appeal and some difficulty and confusion about that. So clarifying what we really want to have happen there, or what kind of certainty do we want to have happen there. So I think nailing that down better would be a good idea. And then one of the things that I would appreciate from staff is, this is something very different. You know, we're usually updating a general plan. We're doing an update of a housing element, and we get a certain amount of information. With this, we're creating housing land use areas in an area that hadn't had them before. So if in the staff report there could be a discussion of what are the land use uses that are included in our regional housing numbers analysis, and how the mixed-use medium-high residential meets those needs. Kind of similar to what we've been getting with the development projects. Here's what we're getting. Some discussion of that, so we have a better understanding of how that applies in this instance, would be helpful to me. And I think that's really all I want to say. I am concerned about the one sub-area between the off-ramp and Vallejo as even remotely realistic for housing. So that's a concern, and yeah, I think that ship has sailed, but that's a concern. So with that, I believe that covers it. Anything else? And again, if you have real specific technical comments, it's good to put those in writing. And anything more you need from us?
No, just as you mentioned, just a reminder to everybody, if you can get us any comments in writing, it's extremely helpful, and the closing date is October 4th.
Okay. So with that, I think our business is concluded for tonight. So we'll go ahead. We're not voting on anything tonight. We'll go ahead and close tonight's meeting and adjourn to whenever our October meeting is. So thank you.